This is iFanboy Pick of the Week, number 818. Go Valley. Brought to you by... Sorry. Hey, welcome to Pick of the Week, episode 818. Shout out to my SFV folks. What's up? I had an 818 number for years. Years and years and years. I like it. It's very... Or there's Hawaii, which is 808, which is nice too. In my life, in my professional business work, I have learned a lot. I know how to look at area codes and know where they're from. That's a thing that I've had to do for my entire life. I'm Josh Flanagan, and that was pretty banal, right? What I just did?
Yeah,
pretty
sure.
bad, yep. I'm with Connor Kilpatrick.
Hello.
You could also say banal, but that feels like it sticks out more, so I go
You
with
can
banal.
say it that way? Who says it that way?
I don't know. I don't think you should. Where iFanboy? Well, because you'd say banality, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We... All right, fanboy.
This is the worst opening we've ever had.
No, it's good. Well, I mean, you can. There's excuses. This is a comic book show. You might not know that so far, but every week one of us picks the book they like the best from their stack of comics. We call that the Pick of the Week. We will talk about that comic book. We will talk about other comic books from the week. We will talk about the Patron Pick. There should be listener mail if there's time. Yeah, listen, parts of the world are literally on fire right now. They've been metaphorically on fire for a while, and it's very disturbing. And we are going to do the show because it will help us feel better, and hopefully it does a little bit of that for you too.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the hits keep coming.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Here's your spoiler warning. There will be spoilers. If that is a huge concern of yours, we talk about what happens in the books. That should be self-evident. That's fine. Connor, you had the pick.
I did. The pick was The Human Target, Book 5 from Tom King, Greg Smallwood, Clayton Cowles, and DC's Black Label. And I said last time that 4 was one of my favorite single issues in a while, and Book 5 is also in that category. This is shaping up to be one of my favorite Tom King stories. In this issue, I mean, in addition to the just wonderful Greg Smallwood art, which I'm sure we'll talk about, this issue takes place in the entire time it takes for Christopher Chance to hand the salt to John Jones at dinner. And it takes place in multiple timelines. And it's just one of those wonderful Tom King construction that he does really well. Where in the course of handing salt, he's having dinner, Ice and Christopher Chance and John Jones in his human form are having dinner. The first panel is John says, "Mr. Chance, will you pass the salt?" And Chance says, "Sure." And in the course of that entire handing him the salt, there's a whole psychic attack that happens. And we've learned that Christopher Chance has trained for by one of the original members of the Legion of Superheroes when he was younger and has a whole affair with her. There's a whole backstory we learned about. Meanwhile, we also see where perhaps John Jones has been manipulated by Fire, Ice's best friend, into being involved in this murder that Christopher Chance is investigating. So we see how Christopher Chance protects himself from John Jones's psychic intrusions, how he turns it around and uses his own training to pull out the important bits from John's mind, and also we learn a bit about Christopher Chance's life as well as John Jones's sad sex life. There was a lot going on here, and it was so perfectly interweaved. And by the end, when he hands the salt to John, you're just like, God damn, Tom King. He really does think about the form in ways that other people aren't, and he has a luxury of doing that because he's only doing these prestige miniseries.
I mean, I think that really puts it down to a very specific thing, is that he thinks about the form.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because there is, and I don't mean to go on a tangent, but it is related. In writing comics, there is a ongoing discussion about like how much you tell the artist or suggest, even how you tell the artist what to draw or how it looks or what, But I think it's fairly safe to say that while he's not going to tell an artist how to depict it, that form matters in this case. And that is how comics should be made. I mean, like, that is the difference between, just sort of depicting some action scenes and making a comic book with, some that's not true.
Well, Marvel style is that way.
Yes. And there's full script, but that only sort of gives you dialogue. And when I was in the Will Dennis episode that just went up, he talks about how basically like Brian Azzarello scripts were just dialogue. Mm-hmm. And, he'd sort of break it up into pages, and then Riso would then interpret that, which is super interesting because Riso didn't speak English at first. So how the hell did that work? But so that's on that show, and you can check it. But, I guarantee you, like, Tom would give a lot of credit to Smallwood, for making all of that work. And one of the things I probably should have asked him more about, and I'm curious, is like how specific all that stuff is.
Right.
Because even through Strange Adventures, like, one panel will be from this place, one will be from another one. I love it. Exactly what you said. Like, I love that he's taking the form into account, and not enough people either can or get to do that. That said, it's challenging. Mm-hmm. I liked this issue, and I knew it was very good, but I was lost through a lot of it because I wasn't quite sure where I was, which I think is part of the point. And I know enough from reading this writer's work that it's going to come together. I'm going to understand it, but I've got to trust the process, and I think that can be difficult.
Were you lost in the overall story or lost in the particular issue?
I was lost in the particular issue a couple of times because we're switching times and places, and I think the one was it. I thought I was looking at ice, but then it was fire and
right.
It changed.
And that was intentional because their brains are intertwined.
Yes. Yeah.
So the whole thing is that Saturn Girl, who is the brunette, and this is Black Label, so none of this makes sense continuity-wise in the regular DC universe, which is fine. Saturn Girl, whose real name is Imra, and is from the moon of Titan of Saturn, is training a young Christopher Chance. It's almost like the young Batman story we were learning earlier, right?
Yeah.
Where he's out in the world, learning the skills he needs to become the human target. And so she's training him on how to protect himself from psychic attacks. And she is psychic, or she has the same powers John Jones has, the mind powers. So he doesn't have those powers, but she's giving him the tools to recognize when someone's trying to probe his memories and how to protect himself and also turn it around on the person and steal some of their memories, even if you don't have that power. So it unfolds through the story so that things you learn in later in the story make things that happen earlier in the story make sense. It's very twisty.
And you have to give the reader a lot of credit.
Yeah.
You have to pay attention.
Oh, you can't fly through this issue. You have to really pay attention. I think that's the case with all these human targets. But yeah, there's a scene in the middle, page 13, where
I was literally looking at that page, going to bring it up.
Postcoital human target and Ice are in bed, but he's sweating, and maybe that's from the sex, or maybe it's from the fact that his memory is being intertwined with John's, in which John has had sex with fire. So now Ice becomes fire, and then later on they sort of switch. It is in the beginning, you're like, what is happening? But then by the middle, you figure it out, while also Chance is remembering his father being murdered because he owes money.
Yeah. You've got the thing where Ice and fire basically look the same. I'm just trying to pick people out because it is a bunch of faces. And so thank goodness Christopher Chance has the white temples. Okay, that's him. But in the past, he doesn't. So you've got 3 versions of that one character in the same book. I
think all the faces are totally different. So other than Ice and Fire, which I think is intentional because they keep switching places in the memory.
Right. And then Jon Jones, he's got 2 faces. It's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of. I mean, also on the craft side, it's a difficult sort of thing to do. So I felt a little disjointed as I was reading through it, and I probably could have done to read it a second time.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like the kind of thing where I was like, oh, this doesn't make any sense. I can't follow this. It wasn't that. It was like, I don't know that I'm able to pay enough attention to it right now.
Right.
It felt like that. I was like, I think that was very good, and I'm going to have to go back and read it again, just because it's all been so great.
I think that John's face is the same through his human and alien form, because there's a second bald guy in the story.
Oh, yeah.
That's the guy who's from the League of Assassins.
And that's all.
Basically Ubu.
26?
Yeah.
But he's bathed in green light also.
Right. But that's not John. He ends up dead later on. Christopher Chance shoots him at the table.
Right. I know. It's just but I mean, it's not even that it's difficult to follow. They're fucking with us.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the thing. It's the whole, because the whole thing is a battle of memory, and so things get twisty in this issue. And I really liked that of it. I like the ambition of it. I like that he's not handing it to you on a silver platter. He's like, this is a very complex issue. And that there was the issue of Mr. Miracle was like that.
Yeah. We saw a lot of that in Rorschach. I mean, that was the case. But it is not easy work.
No, and you have to have an artist who is as talented as Greg Smallwood to make something like this really work. He just, again, becomes a revelation. And they announced this week that issue 6 is next month, and then the 7th issue is going to come out to the end of the year. And if that's because of Smallwood, I'll take it. I mean, I don't love it. I wish they'd done all these issues before they put them out. But if it means that we get this level of craft, then it is what it is.
Oh, sure. No, you wouldn't want, it's like Keith Giffen on breakdowns. Oh, no.
You don't want the Infinity Gauntlet scenario happen, which haunts me to this day.
Ron Lim?
And I love Ron Lim, but that was a George Perez piece, and it didn't end up being a whole George Perez piece. Anyway.
Hey, I love, in the same Tom King world, I love Liam Sharp, but that guy shouldn't have been brought in to do Batman Catwoman.
Right.
Just, like that didn't work.
Exactly. If it took us 12 years to get the rest of that series, even if it wasn't very good.
I think it was going to.
So, Tom King's putting out a lot of work. Supergirl just ended last week. It was Pick of the Week. Next week we have his second Batman miniseries. And he's got Love Everlasting. I'm glad he's get all these little miniseries to try to do different things. Mm-hmm. There's more freedom in it, obviously, than doing an ongoing series. This is out of continuity. He can do whatever he wants with the Justice League characters. This is a straight-up detective noir story in which John Jones is being sexually manipulated. And I've never thought of John Jones ever in my entire life as a sexual being. I don't think I've ever seen him in a relationship portrayed.
I see him with a cat. I see him
with Oreos and TV.
Yeah.
And so it was a little strange to see him in a sexual situation.
Well, because his wife's dead. Like, that's his whole thing. He's very sad about his family.
Yeah. So I've never seen that happen. So I was like, oh, boy. Mm-hmm. This is everything I hoped it would be from this creative team. This is doing really terrific work. Yeah.
I would say they're definitely they're making something just for you. I mean, and this isn't to say I'm not saying I don't enjoy it or appreciate it or whatever. But like this, it's like it's great. It's a lot of boxes ticked.
And look, I'm not like super smart. In the beginning, in the first couple of pages, I was like, "What is happening here?" But once they started peeling back layers and revealing things, I was like, "Oh, that's what's happening here."
I think it helps you specifically. I think you have a slightly stronger toehold in these characters in this world that's going to get you through a little easier than me. Not a ton,
possibly.
But you know the players because you were very familiar with that Justice League run. That's one of your favorites of all time.
I'm not going to say that's wrong, but also I don't know that it makes a difference in terms of the construction. It could be anybody, but it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, but it's one more thing that you don't have to worry about.
That's
because
true.
You know who the characters are, and I don't know Fire and Ice and whatever. It's just a little thing that you don't have to juggle.
True. That's true.
But again, I think that's part of the layered way that it's built is that you don't need to have that, but if you do, it gives you a little something extra,
Yeah.
Like I'm aware of it, but I'm not intimately familiar with it. You know it really well. So, and I'm sure there are other people who you could just read it and you'd be fine. You'd figure it out. It's not rocket science, but it is complex comic booking.
So the last time The Human Target came out, when I said it was one of my favorite single issues in a while,
yes.
You made Iron Man 641 your pick of the week. This week we had Iron Man 642. Correct. And this was very, very good. And in a week without The Human Target, this is probably the pick of the week.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, I read it and I sometimes I think back to, I'm like, should I have made that pick of the week? And then I got to this one and I was just impressed that they were being so brave. Like, they're really making Tony awful. And like the threat feels real, and this little weird cast of characters that they built around this Iron Man book, who at first was just kind of weird, and then they all just stand around in circles. They're always just together, the frog guy and the demon guy, and I don't know their names. It doesn't even matter. But I love that it's this weird little group, and Rhodey's there in his costume, and it's just this crazy thing. Well, you know what I got from this? I was like, this feels like there was a lot of Mark Russell in this book.
Yeah, because
not him specifically, but the things that it did with the people being made intelligent and the blowback from that. It was like that, but just like to be out of Christopher Cantwell's is a great comic book.
So the story is that Tony went off to fight what's his name, Korvac. And in doing so, he ended up with the power cosmic, and he came back to Earth as the Iron God. He's got this silver suit. In the last issue, everybody was afraid of him, so in order to placate everyone, he gave everyone in New York City his IQ.
Intellect, yeah.
And so everyone, average IQ is 185, as the news story says in the beginning. But parts of New Jersey are claiming 170. That was very funny.
That's what I'm saying. Like, that was very Mark Russell, the newscaster.
Oh, it was all very funny because the first one to the new app is terrible for scrolling. 4 pages is all the newscast explaining what's been happening in the city since this happened. And it was very funny and not wrong.
And clever.
Like, it goes really shitty. Everyone's sort of selfish. People are doing good things, but also destabilizing the stock market. And all the kids quit school and everybody quits their jobs.
You're a New York City native.
Yeah.
That seems like the worst possible place to give everybody an extremely high IQ.
I mean, everyone is horrible in their own way, and everybody, yes,
Sure,
it would
but
be
there's
bad.
a lot of them.
It's just a lot of them concentrated in small places.
And they have been trained to live in New York City.
Yes.
And with that comes a certain...
Oh, no, it's super aggressive and
yes.
dog eat dog, so this is definitely not out of the realm.
Right.
14 different New Yorkers have tried to take over the world in the last 72 hours. Like, it was all very funny.
Is that even... You think that's even above the actual average?
That's low.
That's what I'm saying. Like
14 out of 8 million would definitely... Yeah.
No, but even without the super... that's probably happening.
But then again, like,
several apartments in
maybe they're
Queens.
smart enough to realize that it's dumb to try to take over the world. I don't know. But the point is,
right.
The opening was very funny, and then you add Doom into the mix because Hellcat, who is currently Tony's girlfriend, realizes that Tony's out of control, so she's trying to list all the help she can get. And Reed Richards has been made dumber because of this, so he's no help, which is also a very funny joke.
It is.
So she gets Doom, and Doom gets involved. The only thing I thought was a little off was that Jim Hammond was an asshole in this. And I'm not sure why. But other than that, that's fine.
I mean...
Like, he really hates Tony Stark. And I'm not sure why he hates Tony Stark so much.
I don't believe that character's terribly well established. There's a lot you could probably do with him. At least is like the way his character... He's almost a blank slate whenever he gets used. I did want to mention that, like, Cantwell did that little Doom series.
Yes,
he does a great Doom. I love this Doom.
Mm-hmm.
He's really fun to have show up. That's all.
And the thing is, like, Tony is being terrible, but in a way that you can understand why. You know, like, he has all of the intelligence of the universe in his mind, so he knows what he thinks is the right thing to do, and just everyone else is slowing him down. And so he turns all of his people into yes men who are like, this is not a good idea. And, like, I get it. Like, it's not good, but also I get it at the same time. That's the best way to do it, is to not make him pure evil. And he's not evil, but just not make him into this unfeeling bad guy. It's like he's just moving too fast for everybody and making bad choices.
It's a process of how you get there.
Yeah.
You know, like, how do you get to the Phantom Menace episode 1? Well, you give somebody ultimate power.
And all yes men
around him agrees with what he does. And then he loses perspective.
Right.
And eventually it's like, you're going to talk back to me about this? You're going to tell me your idea is better than... And I'm not saying that's how George Lucas turned out.
We saw the documentary.
Product. Yeah. The red pen and the blue pen.
I would point out in page... What page is this? Sorry. This app is not as fast as the old app. I don't even know what page this is. There we go. Page 14. Nothing's happening. Page 14. Fairly good interpretation of holding a pizza slice for Tony Stark.
Is that tomatoes? Yeah.
Yeah, it's tomatoes.
So, okay, let's talk about this. It's pretty good. It's a thicker pizza than I think that you would get in New York City for the most part.
Yeah. Well,
also, here's my question. Who's making the pizza? Everybody's 185.
Somebody really loves making pizza. I mean, you could be smart and still really love to make pizza.
There are absolutely those guys who would go in and make pizza because it's what they do.
And also, maybe it's the best pizza ever made, you know?
It could be. It looks like a good piece of pizza. It's colored well.
Yeah.
The cheese is stretching in the right way. It is an awkward freeze frame of the bite, but it works. It does not look like New York pizza is my point.
No, and he's only really holding the corner of the slice. He's going to lose balance here. He's got to hold the entire back of the slice.
You risk a slide off.
Yeah, and I'm not talking about the under back like Nightwing.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the entire crust. He's got to get the whole thing in. He's got to get that whole thing going.
You want to get that bottom corner tipped up.
Yes, otherwise those tomato pieces are coming right off.
Yeah, that's right. And if it's still hot, you're risking a face burn. That is the worst feeling on earth, by the way, is the cheese slip and slap on the bare skin with the hot sauce.
There's nothing worse than that.
That was the big college thing.
The mouth,
you'd
top
go,
of the mouth. Oh, fuck.
Yeah, I have to get to the pizza as quickly as possible and get slices, and then you take that first bite. The cheese lets go at a higher angle, and it comes down on you, and it sears itself to your skin. So you always want to make sure you bite through.
Is that my skin, or is that cheese at the top of my mouth? That's probably both.
I'm always telling my kids, listen, bite through that. Don't just pull. You got to trust me. I've been through this. And they don't do it. They got to learn on their own. You can't.
Anyway, this has been really terrific.
I think we just made up for the opening.
This arc has been terrific. I think the last arc, when he was out in space and the planet went on slightly too long, but
yes, I like the one on the planet. I don't like the space stuff so much.
Well, it was all sort of the same. Like, it was all sort of the same, him off the planet. But the planet stuff was interesting. Just the whole arc of him chasing Korvac through space was slightly too long. Not terribly, but slightly. And this has been very good.
Arrowsmith Behind Enemy Lines, number 2. I would say I enjoyed the first issue, but I wasn't sure about it, and I enjoyed the hell out of the second issue.
Yeah, this was much better. This was what I was hoping for.
I was totally down with it from the beginning. I had good footing on, so where I was. There's this, I guess, they're not German.
Well, it's fantasy World War I.
Yeah.
I mean, this says London. It's not England. It's a fantasy name for England, but it says London.
Albion. But Albion's one of those words. Anyway, so, he's captured by the forces of the East, and he's in this prison camp, and it's, an officer's prison camp, so, they've got their uniforms on, and they're British gentlemen, and everybody's pretty, it's not a bad place to be. And
Stalag.
A scary dude shows up, the Black Baron, I think is what they call him. Yep, the Black Baron. And then a bunch of stuff happens. We find out why this is ugly. We find out a little more about how magic works in this world and how it intersects with, the gentleman's idea of honor and satisfaction in a duel. And by the end of the issue, I was like, whoa, what's next? It was a page turner.
Yeah, I remember this is how I felt reading the original series. It was a lot of fun. Carlos Pacheco art's terrific. Really, really works in this. It's very clean, as we talked about before. He's got a lot of faces to deal with, but everybody's got their own faces, and which is not something every comic artist can do.
True.
There's a lot of world building here. We've got the religious side of what's going on here with the Catholic Church. It was a lot of fun. This is one of my favorite issues of the week.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think trying to get my footing last time, I wasn't quite sure, and it didn't, I wasn't sure what it was yet, but as we sort of got through this, I knew who everybody was. I knew where we were. I had an idea of the ground rules of the world, and I could really get into it. And also, just looking through it now, what stands out is the coloring in this.
The coloring, yeah.
It's really beautiful coloring. Jose Villaruba.
The green of that dragon,
it
really pops.
He does a thing where when you move to a different setting, so say that we're on page 2, the first panel across the top is a train going at night. It's the prison train. They're on their way, and it's all blue and green. And then we switch to London Albion, and the lighting changes to a sort of yellowish.
Right.
That is enough, to sort of know, we've changed. And it's not a thing that everybody does. It should be, super obvious, but it's a great basic tool of craft. And then actually what's kind of cool is that as you switch to that next page, it sort of fades from light on the left side, which is where you would start reading a comic book page, and then it goes back to a different color, so that you switch to a different place.
Right.
It's just these little, bits, just little craft things that make the comic book better. And if you look actually on that page, page 7, that dude, the Black Baron, that appears to be him, or at least a creature like him, sort of foreshadowed before he actually shows up.
There's a couple of things in this beginning part that are good. Like from a storytelling point of view, that in the pub, there's an argument over patriotism and war. That was just a little couple of panels that was good. And then I really enjoyed on page 4 of your digital reader, where even in this fantasy world of Albion, a funny functionary name is Johnson. Yes, Johnson.
Johnson, you've brought the toast, I assume.
Without having read the first one, you pretty much could read this issue. It gives you enough information.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. Yeah, this felt like the start.
There's the total figurehead emperor of the German side, who's just drunk on the throne.
Drunk as hell.
While the shadowy magic people in the basement are really in control of everything. Yeah, I thought this was very good.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I was very happy about it.
I'm gonna be bummed when Strange Academy goes away, which is gonna happen in 2 issues, I think.
Yeah.
Because this book has been terrific. It's giving me that feeling I want from X-Men a little bit. It has that classic X-Men feel of these kids at the school learning their abilities. And I realize it's very on the nose X-Men, but, it's X-Men plus Harry Potter.
Yeah, they're interpersonal struggles and stuff, and they're just the right age that it's complex and not silly, and they're dealing with stuff, but whenever you're just sort of dealing with your personal stuff, the size of the other matters outside is sort of inconsequential, even though you're talking about end of the world magic and shit like that.
But man, the ending got me, in that classic comic book way where the whole conceit here is they're having their dance, they're formal, and so there's a lot of asking each other out and doing all the pressure of, even when you think you've got someone who likes you, will she actually say yes? Because your head's on fire, even though it's not really on fire because you make out, and clearly his head's not really on fire. I don't understand how that works. But Doyle, who has, Emily, they're nominally in a relationship, but, you're all young and you don't know what that means. So he struggles to ask her out the whole issue, and finally he does, and she says yes, and he's very insecure because he has a firehead.
That and his father is one of the baddest bad guys, yeah.
But she's going to meet him at the bridge outside the dance and go to the dance with him. But as she walks out to go meet him, she runs into, what is his name? Calvin.
The evil guy with the jacket. He's not evil, but...
Not evil. He was the kid who lost his magical abilities, so he did some shitty stuff to get, purchase
He's going to
magic.
turn evil.
And she's going to help him, and that means ditching on Doyle, and he's just heartbroken. And I was just like, oh, this is a classic comic book thing where you do the right thing at the expense of your personal life. And it was just handled so well. The pacing of it was terrific, as Doyle sort of slips more and more into insecurity and sadness as she's not showing up and everybody else is going to the dance. By the end, he's all alone on the bridge. Oh, man, good stuff.
And you think back, it was 1 billion years ago, but if you read this, you're like, oh, come on, he's got to know better. And then I think, you know what? When I was a kid, when I was 15, 16, it took nothing to just lay me low.
Yeah.
We would wait for the phone to ring then. Somebody's supposed to call you, and they don't. And it would destroy you. And I'm not saying it turned me into a supervillain, but my father wasn't Dormammu.
Right.
But
your head was on fire.
I could have seen myself going that way. No, my head wasn't. Well, I mean, it was, but in a different way.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. It's great. You know what? You could say I'm going to be sad it's going to go away, and I think I am too. But I don't know about 2 issues is enough. But another year or so, and they probably.
Yeah, I'm not sure how many, but I know that they've solicited the final issue, so it's got to be the next 3 issues.
Yeah, and then, these characters will probably come back and exist in the world, and it's a good addition to the Marvel Universe. But
it's also entirely possible in the Marvel way they will restart with number 1. But all I know is this particular volume is ending, which is a bummer.
Right. Well, right, but it'll be this will be the jumping on, the first Runaways book or the first Young Avengers or something like that, where none of those characters have been as interesting outside of that as they were there. But
no.
It's a remarkable accomplishment.
Also remarkable that Humberto Ramos has drawn the whole thing.
That's the next thing I was going to say, because it really has kept it of a piece.
Right, because these are basically just a bunch of kids running around. Other than Doyle, they don't really have a distinctive look to any of them, so it's important that the artist is consistent and draws them consistently.
Yeah. Yes.
And you always know who you're looking at.
That's what happens when you have an award-winning, renowned artist
who draws them to look like actual kids with awkward, gangly bodies.
Yeah.
This is just a really fun comic.
Absolutely.
I don't know what's going on. Hold on before you go to the next book. I keep stopping on pages and scrolling back and forth because that's how it happens. We talk about the book, and on the timeline, this is the new Comixology app, and I don't know what the hell's going on. The timeline keeps marking pages for me. There's dots with page numbers, and I don't know why and how I'm doing that or how to undo it. Anyway, I wanted to ask you what you think of Action Comics 1040.
I like it as an Elseworlds.
Yes.
I like the story that's happening. I'm interested in how it's going to go. I like the world that is set up. The thing, with the chains and they're dedicated to the abuse of the dictator. It feels like it's an actual threat. You've given Superman the chance to be heroic in that he's not using his powers. He's what did they call him at the beginning? He's in this gladiator and he's got a big sword. And I was like, he's not going to use that sword.
He won't kill anybody.
Yeah, but he won't use the sword. And I was like, well, why is he holding the sword?
Unblooded sword.
That's the one. Name. Unblooded sword. So he's using it for something. I think the art is exactly right for what
it's very
the
fantasy
book is. And, notwithstanding the stuff that has to happen on Earth or is happening on Earth, which you could either ignore it or you could fill that in, this on its own, not forever, but it's really fun. It's a great Superman fantasy story. Philip Kennedy Johnson, I think... It's funny. I was reading. I was like, "This doesn't seem like Bendis." That's because it's not. It's cool. It's a good time.
Yeah, the Ricardo Federici art is very much like Esad Ribic. Very similar style, to the point where you can see the pencil marks and everything. So it's very from that school, and it works totally right. He's totally fantasy artist look. And if this was a Superman Black Label book, I would be like, "This is terrific." But again, I don't buy the central conceit. They're doing the best they can with the dumb idea that Superman would leave Earth.
I mean, as a story, though, the why he would go and what he has to do, and he feel like it was set up fairly well. I get it. Like, I understand. These people came to him. They didn't even come for help, but they needed help, and he saw that, so he made the great sacrifice and went up there and assembled the team. Like, it all hangs together. It's just, you don't want it to go on forever. But, now that they're in it, God, it could be so much worse.
It has been fun. Superman's depowered, so he's basically Maximus Decimus Meridius in this gladiator battle.
Father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, commander of the armies of the North.
And so, that's basically what the story we're doing here is gladiator Superman on this murder planet. And he's going to triumph in the end, but it does seem like they're in a no-win situation right now.
Yeah.
So it'll be fun to find how they get out of this.
And Mongol is a properly significant villain threat in this.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's got stature, like a dark side kind of thing, but it's not dark side because it's used dark side over and over again, so that's nice. Well, he's very similar.
Yeah, it's not Apocalypse. It's good. Mongol has certainly been, a major threat for decades in Superman books, so it's good that he's being used.
But not overdone to the extent of some of the other villains over the last 10 years or so.
No.
Let's take one moment to explain some things and thank some people. I want to say if you like this show, there's things you can do to help us out. You go to patreon.com/iFanboy. You can directly support the show, which Connor and I appreciate. Mm-hmm. You can unlock shows for everybody. So what you do, it helps everyone. You become part of a really good community. The next stretch goal is that we will add comic book television coverage podcasts in some form to be nailed down later. But that'll be the next thing. But we're going to follow through on it because the earlier goals were the talk explodes and the book explodes, and then we added the media explodes, and we do the hangouts. Like, we're on those. We enjoy them. We make time for them. And I think that they've added a lot to folks listening for us, the experience of the whole thing. And so that was directly as a result of patreon.com. So thanks to everybody who does that. I cannot express how sort of humbled we are about the whole thing. Every time I sort of remember that that's happening as a thing. So you're all good people who do the right thing. And I appreciate that. If you want some stuff, go to ifanboy.threads.com. You'll find 12 designs for T-shirts, and some of them just say iFanboy or something about that, and others have nothing to do. You'd never know that they had to do with the comic book podcast. And one bit further is some people might never know what it means at all. I think you have to listen to the show pretty intently to get some of the designs, which tells you how commercially minded Connor and I are. This is something super vague that you'd have to explain to everybody that you wore it to. But we're really proud of all that stuff that's on there. There's ifanboy.com/support where you find a direct donation link via PayPal if that's what you'd like to do. If you so choose, we thank you for that. And there's one more bit after that. ifanboy.com/Amazon, you'll find links to buy all the books and the book explodes we talk about. You'll find links for the pick of the week and for the music on the show on the show page, and there's a general link for Amazon if you wanted to shop there through our affiliate account. And finally, we have bookshop.org we've partnered with to help local bookstores, and you're going to find those links on the website where it's appropriate, where we can link a book there. So basically the idea is that this is a big thing to help out smaller local bookstores that you can buy from directly. And those are valuable resources from comic book shops to independent bookstores that if you're a reader and you're listening to this, you should appreciate and want to help.
Aquamen #1 came out this week. Aquamen with an E. This is by Chuck Brown and Brandon Thomas and art by Sami Basri. This is about as middle of the road as you could possibly get, I think. I like Sami Basri's art a lot. It's good. The writing is fine. It sort of epitomizes the dumb point we're at in comics right now, where clearly the desire is there to create new, more diverse versions of these characters, but they don't succeed in the marketplace. So what do? Everyone gets an Aquaman. So there's 2 Aquamen in this book. There's 2 Spider-Men and there's 2 Supermans. There's even a joke in here about how they're both named Aquaman. It's just this is dumb. This is dumb.
Wait, there's literally another Aquaman? That's his name? I thought that was Tempest.
He was Aqualad.
Okay.
Aqualad is different than Tempest. Tempest is the original
Tempest
Aqualad.
used to be Aqualad, and this guy with the dreadlocks was the new Aqualad.
Yes, he was in Young Justice.
Yeah, no man wants to be called Aqualad, ever.
Right, so now he's also Aquaman. And it's just oh, God. This is not tenable. This will not hold. That's all I have to say about this book. There's nothing worth talking about otherwise. It was very middle of the road. I don't even know if I'm going to read the second issue.
So it turns out that having this whole Like in the 50s, they added a bunch of kid sidekicks, and now they've added a bunch of non-white sidekicks. And I don't mean that as a complaint, but I mean like it's very see-through. It's very like, really, that's the
thing is, they're not even sidekicks. They're trying to make them the main heroes, but
right.
no one wants to buy the books not featuring the original heroes. So Miles
But
Morales
they just
is also
named
Spider-Man.
them the same thing and said, "Now we've got this," and like it's very like you've thrown a bone and it's not a very good one. Like make a new character who's awesome, who people want to read.
Right.
Don't just call him the thing that you already have. That's terrible.
2 Hawkeyes, 2 everything.
Yeah. Some of those work.
The characters themselves are fine. It's just the name is stupid.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But, Miles Morales, I think, is an outlier.
No one calls him Spider-Man. Everyone calls him Miles Morales because he's not Spider-Man. So give him a different name.
Yeah, that's true. But the other side of it is that everybody calls Hawkeye Clint Barton now instead of Hawkeye. So
they don't call Kate Bishop Hawkeye. They call her Kate Bishop.
Yeah, that's true. It's an issue.
That's because Clint is dead.
Well, Clint's clearly dead. That's the deal.
We're all just hallucinating. He's a ghost walking around the Marvel Universe. It's a tragic story.
All right. You didn't read Robin because you hate Damian. But
I do.
Robin number 11, I don't know how many issues this is going to go, but it would feel like it could end at 12 because or at least this arc will be wrapping up. Big tournament on Lazarus Island. All of the badass fighters, the young folks in the DC Universe are there. It's really fun. I enjoyed it a heck of a lot. There's some new characters that got mixed in and relationships that are formed, and it was fun. And then it turns out the bad guy was Ra's al Ghul's mother, and there's a whole thing with a demon I don't fully understand or whatever. The point is, and the reason that I'm telling you this, and this will count as a spoiler, but Connor, you should know about this, is that he's got some of the Lazarus juice, and they're talking about the pits, and the last thing that we see is, Damian's like, I gotta take care of something, and he is standing in front of Alfred's grave with some of his Lazarus juice.
Well, good.
Therefore indicating that we're going to have a zombie Alfred. But if it's the way that they bring back Alfred, then whatever.
I mean, many characters have been brought back to the Lazarus Pit. There's just, including Jason Todd. And So that's the one thing that they didn't fix when they didn't go through with 5G, was he was killed off because they were going to age up everybody, and they didn't do it. And so they have to fix that problem. And Joshua Williamson, as you know from interviewing, was nominally like sort of in charge of this whole thing. So he would be the one to fix it. So it's good on you if that's what they're actually doing. If it's a feint, then I'll burn this place to the ground.
I really do think that this was a fun series, and they are maturing Damian to the extent that he's a much more interesting character, and he's less like it seems to be a lot about him sort of dealing with where he comes from and what he's involved. Like, he's got a complicated kind of thing going on.
I would be okay with Damian in the world if he was not Robin and he was this other interesting, complex character who exists in the middle, which I realize is also Jason Todd. But if he was this conflicted, psychopathic assassin character who wasn't carrying the Robin brand on his chest. Now, they just announced this week the new Batman creative team, which is Chip Zdarsky, as we correctly guessed last week, and Jorge Jimenez, and they said it's going to be about Bruce and Tim Drake as Robin. So I don't know what that means for Damian.
I don't know how long it's been since All-Star Batman or Batman and Robin came out.
45 years.
Since Damian should basically have aged that much. Don't use that number, by the way, if you don't mind, because when you listen to this, that will be a number I don't. Anyway, I've gotten used to him as Robin to a certain extent, and I love Tim Drake, and I mourn the loss of that character.
Yeah.
Everybody else is still around to a certain extent. Like, it's really about the trade-off from Tim Drake.
We're really off on the rails here, but Tim Drake was such a popular character that he carried his own solo series for like 100+ issues, and he was just shunted to the side. It's so bizarre. And I'm a Dick Grayson guy, but I love Tim Drake as well. I love them both.
Sure.
But it's so strange. It's not like it was Jason Todd and they were like, shunt him over. It was this guy who was incredibly popular for an entire generation of comic readers who carried 100+ issues on his back, and they just said, move over here, kid, and they never dealt with him.
But none of the people who did that are in charge of DC anymore. So everybody who's got it is just dealing with what they have.
I get you. Deadly Class 51, I wanted to mention. Are you still reading this?
No.
I wanted to mention because it's sort of falling into Black Science territory. If you recall, we enjoyed that book, but there was a certain point where it was just like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
This has been going on a long time.
I felt like that a while ago when I dropped out.
So Deadly Class, I mean, look, this was a really good issue.
Sure.
And we're at the year 2005, so all the main characters are in their like late 30s now.
Jeez, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, they started doing a time jump several issues ago where it jumped to like the 90s and then the early 2000s. And so they're adults dealing with the trauma of what they went through as kids. And this is actually one of the better issues I've read in a while, this book. But I'm also like, what's happening? Are we just going to follow them forever? That's fine. But like the super compelling part ended several years ago.
I think that's sort of what happened to me. And then the story's pretty bleak. It's pretty awful. And I think I had a hard time finding a hook with that. Like I finished the first, they got out of the second year of school or whatever it was. And I just thought, this is just, I didn't know who to root for. And I kind of just was like, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's well
I mean, it's still Wes Craig, it's still Rick Remender. It's still the same team together, just like what we were talking about. One other book earlier. Humberto Ramos and Scotty Young.
Yep. Remender, also an artist. Rick Remender is, I think, the guy in the modern comics. Bendis to a certain extent. I just don't like Bendis' taste as much. Remender is the guy who is like, I'm only going to work with great artists. Right. And I think that has colored his career in such a way. And I think that a guy like Tom King learned from that.
And in the last couple issues, Marco? I don't even remember their. It's 51 issues.
Marcus. Isn't it Marcus?
Yeah, Marcus. He's reconnected with his ex-girlfriends from high school. So last issue was the Japanese one. And this one is the Latina. I don't remember their names. And so they're all in various forms, running different crime gangs, and he's sort of an assassin for hire, and he's been running into them. And so in that sense, it's almost like his high school reunion. It's almost like 20 years because they're probably around 30.
It's high fidelity.
Yeah, only with a lot more killing.
Sure.
I've actually enjoyed the last couple issues, but I'm still like, okay, what's happening? I have no indication of how long this is going or what the deal is. But I'm still watching or reading, whatever you call it. They're not viewers.
He's going to live out his 10 seasons of episodic TV in this book now that he didn't get. So it's just going to go on forever.
Oh, for sure. That was a great show, too. Those are the books we wanted to talk about, but at patreon.com/iFanboy, the patrons can vote to add a book to the rundown. Vote to add a book to the rundown. That's just what it means. And it's whatever that means to you.
You make your pick of the week.
No, it's not your pick of the week.
That's true. No, that's
it's
true.
It's just adding a book to the rundown.
Okay.
You want us to talk about a book? Make it a patron pick. That's what it is.
You know what? That's an interesting way to look at it. I don't think I looked at it that way. Like, I've heard you say it 1,000 times, but because I'm always thinking, like, we're going to talk about this. Why would you?
It's a vote to add a book to the rundown. Just making sure we talk about a book or a book we haven't. There's lots of different ways to look at it, and all of the patrons have various things. Like, they'll never read this book. Let's vote for it. Or I want to make sure they talk about this book, or this is my favorite book of the week. However you vote for yourself, all we ever said was, vote to add a book to the rundown. And I only say this because I was asked this question earlier in the week, what it means.
It's a very good answer, and that has helped clarify it for me.
This week's winner was Step by Bloody Step #1, Image Comics, Cy Spurrier on writing duties, Matthias Bergard, and Matthias Lopes on art and colors, and then Emma Price on graphic design, whatever that means.
The title page.
This was a silent issue, and it was not a one-shot. Silent issue, I had to read it twice.
Oh, yeah?
And it was long. It was 48 pages.
Yeah.
First time I read it, I thought, I don't know what's going on, and I don't like it.
Okay.
Second time I read it, it's like, okay, I'm more clear what's going on. To be fair, the first time I read it, I was also trying to watch the news, and it was horrible. So
yeah.
I was a little distracted.
You can't do that for the patron pick. I'd like to mention to the patrons that this guy here is a professional. He did it, and he went, that's not going to work. I got to go back and do this.
Yeah, I didn't give it a fair shot because there was a lot going on in the world, and I was sort of distracted, and then I went back and read it.
As soon as you saw there were no word balloons, you're like, I can handle this.
So then the second time, I liked it more, but still didn't love it.
Right away, the first thing I thought was, I like this art. I like this art an awful lot. There's a combination of, it's very manga. It's like manga with fantasy in the way that there's bits in here that I could probably have remembered better. There's a lot of quick close-ups, and we move around. The style of the main character is manga influences, but it's more than that. It's sort of like European and manga at the same time. I thought very sort of complex storytelling, and at times it was a little hard to follow because a lot of cutaways, and what they would do is they'd give you a wider scene, but then there's lots of quick cuts to within a scene that are close-ups. And it moves very quickly in those scenes. And because there's no dialogue, and you have to work to a certain extent to follow what's happening. And then the other thing is that as time goes on, the characters seem to be getting older, so time itself is moving quite fast, which took an adjustment for me.
Yeah, so the story is basically a kid and a giant robot, Iron Giant, are on a journey across the land. It's a giant robot holding the kid in its palm. And so we can tell the time goes by because the kid's hair gets longer as we go, and the kid gets bigger. So a lot of time has passed. And so they encounter various obstacles or threats or people along the way. It was fine. My biggest problem was there was no context. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know what the stakes were or why they were doing anything other than trying to survive, which is fine. But I was thinking back to it, G.I. Joe 21, the most famous silent issue of all time. And that book makes complete sense even if you know nothing about the characters. Like it establishes the context and the stakes and who the hero and the villain is. It's all established through the action. Like you have to be really particular about the action. It's like if you can't speak, you have to be able to communicate with your hands or gestures. Here, you have to really communicate the story basics with the art. And I don't know that it's necessarily established. The important thing about the story is why, for me.
I enjoyed it, and I thought it was pretty good. It is not my favorite genre. So so you're stripping everything away, I kind of enjoyed the craft of it in terms of like watching how they were depicting these scenes and how they were introducing this world. So I enjoyed it from that standpoint more than I enjoyed it from the story standpoint. I was like, oh, how are you solving this problem that you've created for yourselves in, showing the characters aging up and moving from one place to another and threat and understanding their relationship. There's a reveal at some point, and I didn't understand it. Yeah, I didn't understand the reveal because I don't have much context. Yeah, so that's basically like I kind of like looking how they were doing it, but I wasn't sucked into the story. I don't really care what happens next.
And they cheated. They had alien dialogue balloons.
Yeah.
You can't have any dialogue balloons.
I mean, they're making up their own rules, so it doesn't matter.
I know.
Yeah, I wasn't invested in it from a story standpoint at all.
Yeah. I was surprised to see that there's another issue. I'm wondering if that issue is also silent.
I feel like it would have to be. I think it'd be really weird to start with, like, if it's one issue, it's a stunt. If it's a series, it's a, it's like an.
Well, if it's one issue, it's an experiment
project. Yeah, right. But if I'm saying if it's a whole series and just the first issue has no dialogue, I feel like that doesn't work.
So the back page says a girl wakes. Didn't know it was a girl. Didn't know it was a boy. Didn't know.
I figured out it was a girl. Like
I thought it was, but And then it says she has no memories. There was a point
where I was like, wait, who's this girl? And I had to go back and I was like, oh, that's the girl. Okay. I guess I just assumed it was a boy. My problem.
Then it says she has no memories, no name, no language, nothing except a giant. And none of that was conveyed in the story.
No.
So
it's kind of
that's my problem.
I think it's problematic that they had to tell you.
So
that's the back cover, though. So theoretically, they think you would look at that, but
maybe.
I don't know.
So what are we going to rate Step by Bloody Step #1? Image Comics, Cy Spurrier, Mateus Bergard, Mateus Lopes. And
I'm going to go
Price.
with 3.5.
I'm going 3. The art was terrific.
The art was terrific. I admire the intention of it. I think that there probably are readers who are really going to dig this. I think it had tremendous chutzpah. And I did not. Cy Spurrier is a name that has done some comics I really like, but he's done a lot more comics that were just so needlessly complicated, and there was so much talking that I was actually pleasantly surprised that I was like, oh, you're doing this. Again, we talked about this with Tom King. We have to give credit whether they're experimenting with the form. They're saying, what if a first issue has no dialogue and it's this completely made-up fantasy world that you're building? That takes balls. That's interesting. That alone gets you a point. And I don't think it was bad either. I just wasn't super interested in it, which is different. So that's the patron pick.
Step by step.
Are you going to read the next one?
Oh, no, I'm not.
No. I might.
No.
I might, because I'm curious, but I might not.
Any patron can vote to add a book to the rundown, but the patrons who give at the $5 or higher level, they get their own superpower live on the show, like these guys.
Jason Fischer can speak any language on Earth, but he has to sing it.
Ooh, what about his native language?
native language, he can speak, like say he speaks English, he can just speak normally. But like if some French people come up to him and he doesn't know what they're saying, he has to be like, Je suis à leur rayon ici. Like he has to sing it. The genre doesn't matter.
Okay.
But
the melody doesn't matter. It's a made up melody, or
he's got like when it comes out in song.
I see.
But he can get by that way. But people think it's weird. It's difficult. Like,
well, that's cool.
Like the Germans, like, why is he singing? It doesn't make sense. And he's like, please speak English, mark the English.
So he's not singing German like it's Rammstein.
No, I mean, he could. It's possible. Although that's sort of atonal and not melodic. So
yeah,
I'm thinking of something a little more, I guess, Disneyfied. But listen, I don't know. It's not my power.
Right.
I'm just here telling you what happens. It's Jason's thing.
Dave Carr can manifest tiny suns, and these are magic suns, so they don't create gravity.
I like that you thought through the physics. I just want to.
There's no, problem in that sense. What they do is they float, they create heat, and they create light. So he can manifest as many as you need. If you're at a backyard party and it's getting dark, he can create a string of mini suns, and it'll keep everybody warm in the winter, and also create light.
Is he controlling the energy output of these suns?
No, and they're also whatever our sun is. They're not dwarf suns. They're not gas giants. They're little yellow suns.
That's just the Superman definition.
Yeah, they're yellow suns.
I don't think that's real.
I'm not a scientist.
Cue the text from Ryan.
So he can make little straight suns.
So the energy output is proportionate to the size. If it was larger, if it was the size of our sun, that's how much it would be. See, I'd be interested what the math is on that. If the output of even a tiny size one is still too much.
No. Look. Let's say you're at a restaurant and it's getting cold. You're outside on the sidewalk. There's no heater.
It's mostly about eating outdoor at a restaurant for you, I assume.
Or being outside, yeah. He can pop a few mini suns up, and it's warm again. And not only that, but you can see the food better.
Sure.
Look, the magic in this regulates it. It's not going to burn anyone.
What's the upper limit? Like, could he fuel a city?
Dave is smart enough to not test that upper limit.
I think you'd have to be smart enough to do it. You'd be like, well, let's.
Well, you don't want to make a sun. You don't want to make a sun too big,
Yeah. Well, right. You want to do it carefully. I fried Wisconsin.
Right.
Look, I did.
Patreon.com/iFanboy. That's where you can go support the show, like Jason and Dave. Thanks for being patrons. Let's do some email, even though we're on the edge. Jon C. from Madison, Wisconsin, which was destroyed by Dave's fictional son.
That's why I said Wisconsin, by the way. I just flicked my eyes down, and that's what came out.
John says, I've been thinking of this question since December of 2021, but waited for the email queue to clear and hoped it may be answered. Well, you got it done. John's question. Did you have other names for the program, which I appreciate the use of program. Did you have other names for the program in mind besides iFanboy? If you were to name it now, would you pick something different?
Well, let's start with the second question. Yes.
Well,
yes.
He's talking about the program. The program's named after the website. So you'd have to go back to the website to change the name of the program.
Well, I'm conflating those two.
Yeah.
Like, do you wish your thing had a different name? Yes.
Desperately.
Yeah, no, I feel like it doesn't matter if you've been around for a while and you know it, but I feel very self-conscious about it now for all sorts of things.
People ask, what's it called? They go, oh, fuck.
Yeah, like the context of like fan and boy, and it's.
I'm not ashamed of anything we do at all. It's just that to be 44, say my show is called iFanboy is again not ashamed of it. Proud of everything we've done. Proud of the show. Proud of everything. It's just it's a name we picked out when we were 22 because fanboy.com was taken because we had just gotten out of college and taken a class in senior year about media, about reclaiming subcultures and how subcultures reclaim slurs, and we said, well, let's reclaim fanboy, and that's exactly why the website's named that what it is.
Yeah, there was thoughtfulness to it, but now, at the time we didn't have any plans, but for a while we were fairly well known and we're doing like interviews and shows, and so like it was just a fact. But I think the first time it occurred to me, by the way, was the first time that we talked to Greg Rucka, and he said "Iffin boy," and then he just looked annoyed by it, and I was like, "Uh-oh, And that has that's only gotten worse. But like if I talk to, like, say that I want to do an interview with somebody who doesn't necessarily know us because they're not 40,
Right.
a 30-year-old writer or something, and they don't know who I am. It's a terrible name for that. Like it just doesn't. I have to be like, look, we've been around. We do this thing. Like I have, but if they don't know me, then it's. And I think that's one of the reasons I think I have a harder time, like getting other interviews with people that don't sort of know the show. It used to be easy because everybody knew the show and it was fine, but things have moved on. But also, it's not inclusive. It's not interesting. It's not evergreen. But it is what it is, and we can't change it now.
Yeah, I don't want to think we're ashamed of it. It's just not ideal. We were going to change it. I don't remember why we didn't. Was it because we either didn't change it because was it the video show or because of graphically?
When were we going to change it? I don't remember that.
I don't want to get into it because we were going to change everything.
Yeah.
We were going to change how we were doing everything. We would change the name. We were going to change the output. It wasn't going to be a website anymore.
Well, we were going to do a publication. We were pitching a publication, and we had a different name for that.
Because the reason why we didn't do it was either because the video show took off or because we got acquired by Graphically. I don't remember what it was.
The publication was because of Graphically. We just couldn't do it anymore.
Well, that's why. Then we were going to change it around the time that Graphically bought us. So.
To be fair, though, we went through a lot of names, and we found one that we were okay with, but I don't think anybody was in love with it.
Yeah, no, it was fine.
Early on, I think that it wouldn't have stood out at this point. But early on, like I can't remember any other names that we used for eFanboy.
No, we zeroed in on Fanboy very quickly because of that whole stupid class the three of us took about reclaiming subcultures. And then at the time, somebody owned fanboy.com, which I think even now it's unowned, or at least it was recently when I looked. Mm-hmm. It was going to be fanboy.com, and this would have been the Fanboy Pick of the Week podcast.
I'm glad the eye's there.
The name of the show is Pick of the Week. Mm-hmm. Really, we just have iFanboy at the front for branding, but really the name of the show is Pick of the Week.
Yeah, there you go.
Monica M. from Guadalajara, Mexico. The hype is high for the new Batman movie, and with the worldwide success of Spider-Man No Way Home, once again I've seen in social media the call for superhero movies to promote comic books. From giving away comics at the theater to video essays before the movie explaining what comics inspired the film.
Can you tell what hand gesture I'm making?
Yes, but most people don't want to read comics, right? It doesn't matter if they go to a Batman movie wearing a Joker shirt. They just don't want to read comics and never will. And most people will get a trade at Amazon. They won't go to the comic store. Or do you think a comic book commercial before the movie can make a difference?
No. It isn't going to happen. It didn't. It never happened. Alan Moore sold a lot of comic books when the Watchmen movie came out. I'm sure there's a bump at the bookstore level because they can make those end tables and put the books there, but you're not selling any issues, and it's only getting worse.
Look, you may peel off a couple of people here and there, and I'm sure there's somebody listening now going, I started reading comics because I watched X-Men in 2000.
And I'm sure that if you own a comic shop, people come in around those times to look for things like that. But it doesn't.
But you're not going to create
it's a bump.
What new Wednesday Warriors in any significant way because we've been having these movies come out for 21 years. And comic sales are solid right now. Last year was a terrific year for comics, partially because everyone was still stuck inside. But yes, like comic sales are not trending down right now. So everything's good. And I understand the impulse that you love a thing and you want everyone to love the thing too. I totally get that. Everyone feels that way. You sit there in the theater thinking, man, if everyone here knew the great comic stories that inspired the Spider-Man movie, they would just read comics every Wednesday like I would. And they're not going to. And that's fine.
Look at it this way. This is how I tend to look. Comics to me are like jazz. Certain kind of people tend to get into jazz. Not everybody does, and you can say, well, yeah, but jazz influenced all these other things that come after it. Yeah, it did. And they're not going to, you might go see, I'm sorry for this terrible reference, was the closest I can think of. You might go see Whiplash and love that movie, but you probably didn't go and buy a bunch of jazz records afterwards. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what, comics to me are a literary form of jazz. Like there's a handful of people who will always love it and will know it in and out, but it's not going to be a big thing. That time passed. And
yeah, it's over.
Yeah. It's a niche thing. It will remain a niche thing. You can, if you run a comic book store, you can make a great comic book store that is very successful, taking advantage of that niche audience, and you might even grow it a little bit. You might add 5%, given the opportunity and be smart, but the 90s are not going to happen again. They're not going to be
right, and that wasn't even real. That bubble wasn't even a real bubble.
Right.
It's like baseball. I love baseball more than anything, and I wish everyone loved baseball as much as I do, but that time is over. It's a niche sport. It's a regional sport. It's not a big national sport. It's never going to be a big national sport, and I'm okay with that. It's not going away.
Really? I don't even think about baseball that way.
Baseball is a regional sport. It's very popular in its regions. People love their teams, but in the way that a football fan will watch a game featuring teams that they don't root for. That doesn't really happen with baseball.
Really?
It's a regional.
You still need a lot of people to support baseball.
But the tent is larger than comics, obviously. But
sure, yeah,
it's not the number one sport in America anymore like it was in the 50s, 60s.
It was America as a sport.
And it's not going to be. That's fine. The comics used to sell millions of copies. They don't, and that's okay.
Yeah.
The last thing you want to do is put a fucking video in front of a movie explaining the comics that inspired the film. And that's not me knocking Monica. That's me mocking the ideas that floating around.
They've done it. They've all they've tried all of them. It doesn't move.
People don't want to read in general.
No. I mean, but I think it's the same thing. Like, I'm sure that novel sales spike. Okay, look, I think it works this way. A movie comes out, it's based on a book. Go to the bookstore, you'll see the picture of Keanu Reeves on there instead of whatever it is you had before, and more people will buy that book. But will the overall number of books, will that affect the book market? No.
No.
And that's how it is with comic books. You're going to sell some comic books, but you're not going to boost.
Right.
You're selling comic books, maybe to some extra people, but like overall, you're not going to see, oh my God, comic books grew 10% this year.
You're going to sell them in that moment.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, someone's going to see Watchmen and buy a copy of Watchmen, or watch the Walking Dead TV show and buy more copies of that trade, but they're not going to come back every Wednesday and buy other comics.
Right.
And
what's kind of cool though is that with the economics of comics being what they are, very small, that small boost can mean a lot to the people who created it. Yeah. So that's actually a good thing, especially we're probably not so much Marvel or whatever, but like if apparently there was a Preacher show. And if out of that, they came and they sold another few thousand comics or, whatever, like that's going to benefit the creators. Yeah, trades. I mean, but, so that will be significant. But, all these DC shows, they're not selling Superman trades, or Supergirl or whatever. And that's not filtering down to the creators necessarily.
It is what it is. The culture is not. People don't read. Even the books, like if you look, the New York Times bestseller list, the threshold to get on that list is very, very small.
Yeah.
Most people who write books don't do it for a living. They have another job. Even people who are really successful and sell a lot of books, or quote unquote a lot of books, they still have other jobs because other than a very small handful of authors,
the people at the supermarket check
you don't sell enough to support yourself.
Yeah.
You really only have to sell a few thousand copies of a book to get the New York Times bestseller list. That's what most people don't know. People don't read.
Yeah.
They'd rather watch the movie. That's fine.
It is. It is how it is.
It is what it is. Comics are healthy. Comics are not going away. If comics were like on their deathbed, I might have a different answer. But they're not. They're doing fine.
I would also like to say that where Connor said everybody wants everyone to love the thing they love. Not my case. I'm kind of the opposite. Like, I've been into basketball, and I'd like it if everybody didn't like basketball because I could get better seats. There would be less people around. I don't want the hassle. I just need 3 people to talk about it with.
I think I agree with Monica. I don't know. I think Monica's take is our take. It's hard to say.
I agree. She wasn't arguing for that. She was just...
Yeah, Monica's correct. It is what it is. People don't want to read. That's fine. Let them enjoy the movies, and you can have your comics, and neither one of those is going away anytime soon. Contact at iFanboy.com. That's you can write in like Monica and John. You can write in for this show. If you write for the Mediasplode, please put Mediasplode in the title so I can put it in the proper folder. In the meantime, here are other shows we have for you to enjoy. Almost all of these are from the patrons. Currently behind this show in the feed, Josh mentioned it earlier, his Talksplode interview with Will Dennis, part 2, the 100th episode of Talksplode. More talk with Will Dennis. I haven't heard it yet, Josh, because it just came out. What is the topic of this show?
More or less, the first one we talked about Vertigo, because he worked at Vertigo during a very fertile and just wonderful historic time for comic books to be at Vertigo.
He's an editor, by the way.
Yeah. Really, a guy who brought in... he's right up there with Bob Schreck as a guy who you can look at and see all the people that he brought in to comics and be like, oh my God, he changed comics. Will Dennis had a big hand in that. Just like Jason Aaron is in comics because of him. That's just one example. But in 2013, 14, DC was like, we're moving to LA, and he didn't go. So he had to start a new career as a independent comics editor, freelance comic editor in this world that had been very changed. And we talked about that and sort of having to start from scratch. And you went from a really big corporate conglomerate, and it was like we talk about comics as being a poor man's game, and I think if you were an editor in the early 2000s, you were doing pretty well for yourself. And he said, so you have to start over completely, learn how to call diamond, and do all this stuff that he never had to do for himself. This one's actually a little longer than the last episode, so good guy, not afraid to say anything. Will tell you what he thinks and what happened, and a really great look into. We haven't got a lot of editors on here, and his take on comics is not the same as mine. The way that he looks at them is he's not into the craft of the whole thing in the way that I am, but he's like, is it cool? And a lot of great comics came out of that ethos. So
there you go. That's right behind the show on the feed. And a little bit behind that one is last month's Media Explode show, where we talked about the Book of Boba Fett Season 1. And so you can find those back there. Coming soon, coming in the month of March, because this is the very end of February. This coming week, we have our Book Explode, the new Teen Titans, the Judas Contract. We're going to be taking a look at that classic DC storyline. And then the week after, we're going to have Catwoman Hunted, the animated brain trust, reviewing that film. We've already recorded it. Somewhere in the middle will be the review of the Batman. That's not quite sure when that's going to come out exactly, but that's going to be in there somewhere. And then we'll have our pre-Oscars Media Explode show in March as well. Those are the shows you'll be getting in March. 4 shows.
You can find all of our shows over at iFanboy.com. When I say it like that, I don't mind it. As well as the archive of years of great comic book writing from our talented staff. It's not even a word anymore. It's a sound.
Yeah.
To a certain extent. It's a series of letters that make a sound that don't mean anything until I say it to someone else, and then all of a sudden it's starkly clear. To find out what the pick of the week is before the show comes out, follow iFanboy on Twitter and iFanboy Comics on Instagram. You can follow Connor and I individually on Instagram at CSKilpatrick and J.A. Flanagan. You can subscribe to our YouTube page over at youtube.com/iFanboy. The old video shows are all uploaded except the minis, so the minis are going up. And to, again, to point out, the shows were designed to be sort of watch whenever. They aged, but that's what will happen. But the minis were supposed to be up to the date. Here's what's happening right now, so just be prepared for that. This past week, Stan Lee at San Diego Comic-Con 2008. Who did I do that? Is that the white shirt with the blue tie?
No, Ron did it.
Ron, okay, I can see it.
We did it in the lobby. It was strange. We had people walking behind us.
The guy got to meet him? Yeah,
we had a contest for one of our listeners to meet, or viewers at the time, to meet Stan Lee, and that happened, yes.
Yeah, awesome.
But that's our last Comic-Con show, finally.
Oh, the last
2 weeks.
I was like, we went to shows after 2008.
No, we did 2 straight weeks of
right, I got it.
Comic-Con. Yeah.
We did the pick of the week, Final Crisis number 3. If you want to know what we thought of Final Crisis number 3.
Oh, just me.
That time.
Yeah.
Right, you, but I was using we, the royal we.
The royal we. That's fine.
The royal we. Grant Morrison and...
J.G. Jones.
J.G. Jones, that's right. Prestige. Connor made that the pick of the week.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's there. You can see all of history.
There's some fun ones coming up. We have about 30 more minis after this.
Mm-hmm. This is where we
There's
started
some
to
wacky
get...
ones.
Yeah.
Hey, if you like the show, consider leaving a review or a star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Even that is word of mouth to help your friends or whoever asks about what podcast you listen to. We appreciate that. Help us spread the word. We do thank you for doing so. And we thank you for listening for this week. And Josh, happy birthday.
Thank you.
When this comes out, it will be your 40th birthday.
45.
So, congratulations. You made it.
Thank you. I did it. If this is the halfway point, I'll be fine. Oh, God, just saying that felt horrible.
Halfway to 50.
That's not what I meant. I was talking about dying. Are we at the point, for a long time, people were stop talking about being old all the time. Are we old enough that we can talk about being old without people telling? Because we've been doing it since we were in our 20s. But now...
Yeah, but now things really hurt. And
oh, sure.
Getting the AA or RP magazine soon.
We have relationships with our doctors now.
Oh, I call my doctor by his first name. Yeah, it's great. Hey, Barry. Thanks for listening. See you next week. I'm Connor.
I'm Josh. I hope you enjoyed this extra 15 minutes that Connor saddled himself with.